And welcome to the podcast. I've got Whitney Isola from Connecticut, and she is going to talk to us all about the future of tech in healthcare and how to empower women in healthcare entrepreneurship. And she's at the Archer Review, where she plays a pivotal role in managing operations and strategic growth. So, really happy to have her on. She's really trained as a registered dietitian, and she's going to talk to us all about her experience. And so, Whitney, welcome.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Briefly introduce yourself. I know you're at the Archer Review, and we'll dive into the conversation.
Sure. So at Archer Review, we're at a very exciting crossroads. We are a medical and nursing test preparation and education company. And we went through a private equity transaction in the fall. And so we're just very much in a growth stage at the company. We're really excited about a lot of our offerings in the medical and nursing market and just getting a ton of really great user feedback. I'm just enjoying the ride right now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. I know you're going to say something.
Yeah, no, I was going to say my background is as a registered dietitian. I have worked in a number of different healthcare settings, from community hospitals to major health systems to multidisciplinary medical practices. So it's fun to let that healthcare experience inform some of my work. But at this point, I am the president of operations there, and so have a little hand in a lot of different things, and it's been really enjoyable.
Interesting. So we'll dive into the topic, and you talk about tech forward healthcare. And so, what about the work at Archer Review are you doing that is incorporating tech in healthcare?
Yeah, we really feel aligned with the mission of improving and enhancing accessibility for the next generation of learners that want to get into the workforce and join the healthcare workforce. We've leveraged technology to be able to not only provision information and for this next generation that's coming out and taking their boards and et cetera, we're trying to better prepare them as clinicians, give them better analytics and feedback into their performance so that they can really fine tune where their weaknesses are instead of spending a lot of time maybe not sure where they're strongest or where they're weakest. And on top of that, we're able to do it at a price point that really helps broaden access to these professions. So at least a few times a day, we get testimonials from students that they are part of the reason that they now have RN or MD or DO behind their name. And it's just the most fulfilling thing.
Hmm, interesting. A follow up question I have for you is how do you see the future of tech in healthcare? It's more of a broader question.
Sure, yeah. It's an interesting question. I think that obviously there's so much about technology that we can leverage for the better in healthcare, in other industries as well. I think that with the advent of electronic medical records and whatnot, initially there was a time saved, and then for probably 10 years there was a huge time suck because of the administrative burden that was falling on healthcare professionals, the kind of if you didn't document it, it didn't happen mentality that the insurance companies created that environment that for legal, tort law, self-protectionist reasons that EMRs and documentation worked in the health system setting was just very burdensome for clinicians. And I think over the past 5 years or so, with more intuitive things like AI capabilities, note takers, these executive assistants that can be in and part of visits at the point in which healthcare is being provisioned, and more automated things like RFID tagging in hospitals so that you know which providers were in the room at one time. It's helping to now again alleviate some of that administrative burden. So I think we're starting to see this nice turning point overall where technology is really positively impacting healthcare again. We're getting to experience a lot of innovation across the workforce and take advantage of it.
Mm, interesting. And you mentioned AI. How are you thinking about AI at Archer Review, and how are you positioning how do you see AI playing a role in tech and healthcare?
Yeah, so AI is obviously like a very all-encompassing big umbrella terminology. Currently, we're using machine learning, as I said, for the really pinpointed analytics. So we collect a lot of data on the difficulty level of questions that we're asking the student, the bell curve distribution of how people are answering it. We're using those p-values to help design the testing, and then also using the topic related information, how that sort of the topics are tagged in the back end to deliver an experience to the students in which they're learning about where their gaps are. Currently, we use machine learning in a very robust way in the back end of our platform. We've been doing some development work with AI and question generation. You obviously cannot take the human out of teaching and medical writing, but we can use it to generate some volume and then have our team go to town vetting all of that content and getting that into the product in a meaningful way. So yeah, we've put a lot of guardrails around all of our development and use of AI. We're not afraid to use it, but at the same time, it's not the be all end all. You have to have this important healthcare personnel
Mhm.
attached to it that can really understand the nuance of how to use it and when to use it.
Interesting. There's so many, because we talked about tech and healthcare and AI, and you're correct in how it's all encompassing. The Particularly, you talk about how technology is transforming medical and nursing education, and what innovations are shaping the future of healthcare learning.
Yeah, what I mentioned is just the base platform and content learning opportunities that exist, but there is a lot of interesting stuff in the market that we're starting to keep an eye on with regards to like simulation labs that might be in community hospitals or major academic institutions. There's also some hunger for VR associated, like ways to learn how to interact with a patient and things like that. Obviously, those things can't replace like the real clinical skills of learning with such fine touch how to administer certain medications or place a line in a patient and things like that. So obviously,
Mm.
technology will never replace that in-person training need, but there can be ways to leverage it in the classroom first to make those in-person experiences more meaningful.
Because you alluded to augmented reality, virtual reality. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, there's so much about healthcare that you really need to have the in person. So I think things like doing like a mock surgery and getting the lay of the land of very specific anatomy and potentially being able to bake into that exactly what the imaging parameters are for a tumor so that somebody can have had a visual before they're actually physically in the body cavity. So I think there's some interesting, and listen, that's not my expertise, right? I'm not a surgeon by training. I'm sure that there's many more thoughts and ideas on how to use it, but that's just one use case that I think is interesting that I'm sure we'll start to see some compelling use of those tools
Mm.
in the coming years.
Mhm. Yeah. Talk about, because what's really interesting is I think over the last 25 years, it's tons of bureaucracy and regulation and not much innovation. Like they call it the EMR innovation. I don't think it really was innovative, but how do you navigate the challenges of integrating cutting edge technology into a highly regulated healthcare industry?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. It, I think that we saw with COVID what happens when you strip away some of the red tape and let a few companies run with things and also leverage government dollars to invest in innovation. Rapid pace, don't know if it's going to pay off, and the payoff was there. So I would like to think that there was some learnings about the benefits of pulling back on some of that regulation over the past several years. I know that in some areas that red tape got slapped right back on. And in some areas, particularly with, for example, telehealth coverage and whatnot, there was a little mentality of, oh, wait a minute, that worked out okay. We don't need to start adding back all of these restrictions because care was provisioned in a way that we hadn't envisioned before, and it worked. It's such a tough question because obviously you're dealing with people's lives and health, and so the regulation comes from a well-intentioned place in terms of wanting to provision care that is evidence-based and that is consistent with current recommendations. But yeah, we do have to balance in innovation and clinical trials. I think clinical trials is an area where there's been a lot of focus on expanding access, and that kind of ultimately helps support innovation in the sciences. So I don't know. I don't know if that was a good answer for you, but
Mm,
I think there's just a lot of different ways we could think about that question and look at it. And I don't know that it's better or worse, but I would like to think that there's some better tolerance for innovation between everything that we've seen with the GLP-1s recently, everything that we saw through COVID and vaccine development and the pace of that, and then also just the expansion that we're starting to see in the clinical trial space.
mm. Interesting. Yeah. Kind of talk about just as a closing future trends in healthcare entrepreneurship and what emerging trends do you see shaping the future of healthcare startups and where should aspiring entrepreneurs focus their efforts?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right now, I think there's a lot of innovation and interest in the weight management space. As I mentioned, that GLP-1 space. I think that there's innovation that's happening in medical devices, trying to figure out like wearables and any kind of like meaningful data that from wearable devices that can get spit back to your providers. I think that there's definitely a lot of innovation going on. I will say, in terms of somebody wanting to dive into the entrepreneurial space, my advice would really be centered around taking time to do a ton of informational interviews, really beat up on an idea before you go out to execute it, and really think through product market fit questions. So, what is it that you want to build? Who is the customer that's willing to pay for it? Why are they willing to pay for it? What are the pain points that you're alleviating? And then, how are you going to tactically get that message out to them? Because I think that is the most time consuming part of any kind of entrepreneurial journey. And it's never perfect. It's always iterative. You're going to be doing it forever. But with a lot of um, investors, you have one shot to sell the idea. And so to make sure that idea is fully baked ahead of time is really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So, how can people find you and learn more about you and reach out to you?
Oh, yeah. So my name is Whitney Isola. I am on LinkedIn. You can find me there, Whitney. Last name Isola. I'm also on social media, but I'm not really that active. Definitely the elder millennial there that just looks at some stuff here and there. But yeah, if anyone has anything that they want to talk about or reach out about or wants some advice or support or get pushed in a certain direction, like I'm always happy to have a conversation, especially with people that are young and trying to get their name out. Um, so definitely feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. And then you can also find us through Archer Review. So our company for that healthcare workforce board prep and education for medical and nursing disciplines is you can find us at archerreview.com. So ARCHEREVIEW.com.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on and really great discussion.
Thank you so much.